Can everyone hear me? Awesome. It's the first time I put on the mic today. Hello and welcome to the Advanced Testing Workshop. Quick note, if you walked in and didn't pre-register, there is a Slack thread in this Slack channel, Coalesce Workshop Advanced Testing. Add your email in there, and the TAs will get you access to everything. This is the Advanced Testing Workshop. My name is Benny Reginald. I am with DBT Labs. I'm on our professional services team. Been here for about 7 months, enjoying my time at DBT Labs.
And I'm Lauren Ben-Ezra. I've been with DBT Labs on the professional services team for about 1.5 years. That's my cat, Pewter. He doesn't have any eyeballs. And I'm not going to talk too much this time. I'm going to let Benny take the reins, but if you need help and you're walking around, I'll be walking around. So take it away.
And as we're going through the session, if you have a question on anything, raise your hand. We have TAs that will help you out. All right, today we are going to talk about testing. Everybody in here should be familiar with the out-of-the-box tests that we have. There are 4 of them. Can anyone tell me what they are? Just shout it out. You don't have to raise your hand. Awesome. I heard them all at some point. So we have unique, not null, acceptable values, and relationships. So those are the 4. What this class is going to tell you is how do you go beyond that? If you want to get more advanced with your testing, if you want to test more specific things, if you want to test for things that are null, if you want to find those types of things, we'll be able to do that after today's session. Our goals are to talk about how you can configure your tests. We're going to add some tests from packages that other people have written for you. We're going to build a singular test, and then we're going to promote that to a generic test. So we've already covered tests in general, what they are. In DBT, they are assertions that you make about your models, sources, seeds, and snapshots. In DBT, this is kind of important for later, so just keep it in mind. When you are writing tests, you are trying to find things that disprove your assumption. So when we're talking about a not null test, the test itself will actually select for things that are null. And if you get results back, then the test will fail. That's important to keep in mind for later. But other than that, we will jump right into it. How many of y'all knew that you can actually configure those 4 tests that come with DBT? I see a couple hands. Awesome. I'm glad there are not a lot of hands. That's why you're here to learn. So within DBT, every test can be configured with a severity. By default, all of your tests are set to error if a single record is returned. It will fail the entire test, which will in turn fail your run. How many of y'all have perfectly clean data where every single time you run a test, you want to know if 1 out of 1 billion records fails? No one. Yeah. So it's actually really convenient to maybe set a threshold. If I have 1 billion records, I'm okay with 1 failure. Maybe if there's more than 100 or more than 1,000, I want it to fail. And that's what severity can do for you. You can set that up to only warn you if it is below the threshold, but then error if it goes above it. You can also apply a where clause to your filters, or to your tests. So instead of testing all your data all the time, it's possible to do a subset of it. Maybe you only want to test the things that were loaded in the last 3 days, or you only want to test where an ID equals some certain value. You can do that with the where config. Within DBT, you can also store failures. So anytime that you run a test, if you want to store the failures, DBT will maintain a schema separate from your target schema, where all of your records from the failed test will be available for you. This is really good for troubleshooting things, so if you wanted to go in and see the table of the records that failed, you can do that. Now, how many of you have configured a test backwards, where you have, in fact, selected all your records instead of the ones that actually failed the test? Anyone? Yeah, I see a couple hands. Cool. That's where the limit comes in. So with a limit, you can say, I don't actually want to return everything. Maybe I only want to return a subset. So if I have 1 billion records and I accidentally did a backward selection, I don't actually want to load all 1 billion records into a separate schema. That might take time and resources. So with the limit, you can say only return 100, only return 1,000, and it prevents things like accidentally writing a backwards test. All right, so what we're going to do is a quick exercise to add those configurations. You do that in a YAML file. If you are following along in the project that we have for you, you will find this in the staging folder under tpch and models.yaml. Within there, it won't look exactly like this. You'll find a table named part suppliers and an available quantity. What I'd like for you to do is add these configs to the test and see what happens. If you have already set everything up and you did a DBT build or a DBT run and a DBT test, it should have failed for you. This is actually going to fix that, or it'll throw an error instead of failing your run. So we'll give 5 minutes to do this. If you run into any issues, just raise your hand and we'll come around and help you.
Be sure to create your own branch for this. So
Yes.
this is a project that we are all in, all 100 of you, if I can do some quick math. So make sure you make your own branch and then start adding the configs.
All right, how many of you were successful in getting what it looks like below, where you got a warning instead of an error? Was anyone able to get that? All right, got some people. I'm also being told that we ran out of space on our example server. So if you get something that says that there's not enough space to run it, don't worry, you can just follow along with the demo. This will be recorded. We're trying to get more space added. But you shouldn't have to build too much more from here. You can just watch the demo if you do end up getting that error. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is adding tests from packages. How many of you were in the packages workshop from earlier in the week? Yeah, I recognize some of y'all. Awesome. So it's going to follow the exact same principles. Packages in DBT are just separate DBT projects that are available for you to pull into your own project. They are housed on the hub. And so if you want to go to hub.getdbt.com, you will find all the packages that are available for you to bring into yours. The two that we're specifically going to be looking at today are DBT utils and DBT expectations. So I'm going to click on this actually and show you real quick. So you should see DBT utils. It'll be the featured one out there. And when you click in, it'll look like this. And there is an entire section specifically for generic tests. So if you want to move beyond the 4 that are included with DBT, you can use these generic tests. To do that, there's a packages.yaml file that you will put the information at the top into. You'll be able to pull this into your project and use those tests that you want. The one that we're specifically going to look at in this class is the unique combination of columns. So we'll get to that in just a second, but if you want to look through the docs, feel free to click on that. The other one is DBT expectations. And this entire package's purpose is to provide you with additional tests that you can add to your project. There is everything that you could ever want out here. You can do things around table shape. So I expect my tables to have this many columns. I expect a specific column to exist. You can do things around string matching, which is very helpful. So if you want to use regex patterns to find strings for testing purposes, you can do that. What I'd like you to do is just go out to the hub, poke around, look at some of these tests, and what we're going to do is add a couple to your project. So the first thing, if you are using your own project and you're not following along with us, you will have to add these packages to your project. If you're following along, they were already provided for you. You've already run dbt deps, so they should already be in your package. Also, if you're following along in your own project and your dbt utils version is different, don't change it. Just keep what you currently have. It doesn't have to be the 9.2 version. All right. How many of y'all have done something like this in your project, where you have a table that has a combo key and you've concatenated them together to serve as your primary key checks? Lots of people. Yeah. Has anyone had problems with that before? Someone shout out what kind of problems they've had. Yeah, nulls will always throw you off. What else? Oh yeah, so quick explanation of what this is doing. It's taking 2 columns and it's concatenating them together with a separator in the middle. So it's taking part ID, concatenating it with a pipe, and then supplier ID. So you end up with 1 column that's a concatenation of both of them, and then it's testing that for uniqueness. Yeah? Yes, a delimiter that's not right, where it potentially exists in the data. Yeah. Yes, that could be a problem as well. You were trying to reference it before it's actually materialized. Yep. Has anyone tried to concatenate numeric values and strings, or dates and numeric values, and run into issues? Snowflake has a fun quirk where when you convert a date to a string, the number of micro or nanoseconds that you get is actually your display setting. So there's a chance if you go out to nanoseconds, but your display settings are microseconds, you will actually cut off part of the date, which will look like it's a duplicate when it's not actually. So there's a better way to do this. Within dbt utils, there is a macro called, or a test called unique combination of columns. And what it allows you to do is put the columns in, so part ID and supplier ID, and instead of concatenating them together, it would write the SQL exactly like you would expect it to write the SQL. So it'll select these columns, group by, returning anything that has a count greater than 0. So you don't run into these issues of when you concatenate two fields together. And then, what if you're someone who likes to get fancy? So, in the US, phone numbers are typically 3 digits, followed by 3 digits, followed by 4 digits. I tried to look up what those are actually called, like area code, and then I don't know what the middle one is, so we're just gonna run with it. But it's very common to have a dash. So like, let's say that I have a column that has 3 digits, a dash, 3 digits, a dash, and then 4 digits. And I wanna make sure that it's always in that format, because if I'm doing something with that field, I always need it to be the same. So you can do a check like that using DBT expectations, and you can use regex in your tests like this. So what I'm gonna do is give you a very open-ended assignment. I don't particularly care which test you use, but try some of the tests. Try to add one test from a package into your project. It can be this one, it can be the unique combination of columns. Those are both available for you if you actually wanna do that, but give it a shot. Try and add a test from a package into your project. And raise your hand if you have issues.
Has anyone ever spent a whole lot of time writing macros in Jinja only to realize that it already exists? I wrote a whole blog post about it, and then I deleted all of the code because I realized it already existed. Don't do that. Google. We love Googling.
Someone asked a question about what does the isRaw do? That is a input to when it's going out to your database. It will see the forward backslash as an escape character instead of an actual backslash. So if you're doing this in real life, you will always just toggle that and see what works. I can't tell you exactly when this will work. I highly doubt most people can, but that's what it is. It's the escape characters, whether it's seen as a literal escape or the character.
Who successfully added a test from a package? One person? There it is. Okay. What'd you add? Nice.
I like it.
Anyone else? Where's your tunes?
Sorry, yeah, I just realized. All right. How many people successfully did that? A good number? Awesome. If you didn't, I highly encourage you to just play around with it still in your own projects that you might have with dbt. Just check out the packages in GitHub, or yeah, they're mostly in GitHub. In the README, it'll actually show you how to use the package and how to apply it. So give that a shot. Next, we're going to talk about singular tests and how to promote them to generic tests. Can anyone tell me what a singular test is? Just shout it out. Yeah, exactly. It's a test for one model, just like singular implies. So you're testing one model. Yeah, what's up? Yes. Yes, the names have changed a couple times. So yeah, bespoke test, singular test, specific test, all of those things mean the same thing. It means that you're writing a SQL file to test a single model. That logic cannot be used across models. It has to be applied to that one model. So there are definitely use cases for singular tests. They can be useful when you have a really specific thing you want to test for in a model, and that can't be generalized to other models. However, there's a lot of times where it's just easier to write a singular test, and you end up duplicating the logic 4 times. So you write it for one table, it's really easy to copy and paste a file. So I want to show you a better way. So to start off with, we actually need a singular test. So we are going to write a singular test. To do this, in your project, in the test directory, you will add a new file. The name of the file doesn't necessarily matter. Our naming convention we like to do is the name of the model and then the thing that you're testing. So in this instance, stage TPCH parts name, not test. So the name of the object is not test. So in your project, go ahead and add this. And I will give you a few minutes to do this. If you're using your own project, you're not using the one that we provided, that's okay. Just write something that's very similar to this. You need a model, and you need a column equal to a value. So it doesn't have to be this exact thing.
Did everyone write a singular test? How many people? Okay.
We're just
Anyone
giving
have
you your arm
questions?
workout today.
Yeah, I know,
Everybody
seriously.
raise their hand.
Anyone have questions if you did not get a singular test in there?
If you didn't get this, that's totally okay. There is a checkpoint branch that you can check out. So if you haven't gotten to this point where your project is working and you've created this, just check out the checkpoint branch, and that will give you this. Because we're going to build on this in just a second, so you will need this. Okay, so looking at this query, there are 3 things in the query that we can generalize. There's actually only 3 things in this query that are not just pure SQL keywords. So, can anyone tell me what those 3 things are? The model, column, and what's the last one? Perfect. Yep. So model, column, and value are the 3 things that if we wanted to make this a generic test, we can use those. So what we're going to do is have an intermission to remind you that when you write generic tests, they are special. They are macros, but they're a special kind of macro. So in dbt, if you create a generic folder underneath the tests folder and you store your tests there, dbt will automatically pick them up and know that they're generic tests. You can apply them to YAML once you save them in there. Also, as opposed to macros where you use the macro keyword, you use the test keyword when you're generating these. And I'll show you this in the next section. But go ahead and create that generic folder if you don't already have it underneath tests, and we'll use that in the next slide. There's a reminder, checkpoint branch. Go ahead and check that out if you want to. So what you can do is we could create a macro that looks like this. Column does not contain value with an input of model, column name, and value. And the code for that will look just like this. So I'm actually going to demo this for you, and you can follow along with me if you'd like. In the super zoomed in IDE, can y'all read that? Cool, got some nods. Makes it really hard for me to work, but that's okay, as long as y'all can see it. So I have my tests. I'm going to create a new folder. That's off the screen. Called generic. And then what I'm going to do is, since I'm actually overwriting this, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to move it into my generic folder. New functionality of the IDE, hence the gasp. For dramatic effect. In the old IDE, you had to rename things to move them. Here, you can click and drag. So I can also rename my file. I always want it to match the name of the thing that's in the file. So this test is called column does not contain value. And we will go ahead and hit confirm there. All right. The first thing that we need to do is we need to wrap this in that test keyword. So we will open up our Jinja brackets, write the word test, and name our test. Column does not contain value. Open and close parentheses. And then we need our input. So we need the model, we need the column name, and we need the value. And then at the very end, before we start doing anything else, let's go ahead and do end test so we don't forget. I always forget. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this query and we're going to replace our hard-coded, quote-unquote hard-coded, refs aren't hard-coded, but we're going to replace them with our inputs that we have here. So you have to surround them in double curly braces when you're referring to your inputs here. Since my ref already has that, I can just select my ref and put model. And so now, whatever is inputted as model will be put into the from clause. From there, I'll do the same thing for column name. So I'll add my double curly braces and do column name. And the last thing to note is that when you are feeding values in, they are not quoted by default. So in order for this value to still be quoted in the SQL, we have to keep our quotes. So we're going to put our double curly braces around the word test, and we'll feed in value there. If you've made all those changes and hit save, you should see a green ready.
Benny,
Now, yes,
I have a question.
what's up?
Do you have to use model instead of a different name for models?
You do. Good question. So the 2 values that you have to use, because this is being fed in through YAML, are model and column name. Those are actually going to be provided by the YAML file. You won't provide those as input to this, but by putting it in the YAML file, which is what we're about to do, it will feed in the model and the column name to your test for you. So to show you what that looks like, we are going to open up the models folder, or file. So it's going to be that models.yaml that you were modifying earlier. And we are going to scroll down there is a staged TPCH parts, and we're going to apply our test to this. Now, I don't actually remember how to do this. I highly recommend copying and pasting. This should be in the Slack channel for you if you want to copy and paste this. But we will grab our test, and we will apply it in our YAML file. So underneath name, I will have tests. And let's make sure that that works before I explain what it does. When you hit save, you should see ready again. And so, just like I mentioned, you aren't providing the inputs for model and column name. That's provided by the YAML. It knows the model name because it's here, and it knows the column name because it's here. So all you actually have to provide is the word test. And then when you run this, so if I want to test the specific model, I can just say dbt test for that model. And if all went according to plan, you will see a test called column does not contain value, and it'll let you know if it passed or not. I can also scroll down here and take a look at it. So if you click on the details of the run and you scroll down, you'll notice that this is the exact query that we wrote. And this is how you can pass in different things to the same generic query. Any questions on that before I move on? Yeah, what's up?
For the test folder, what happens if you have like subfolders and like someone accidentally names the same file, like a subfolder, things like that? Is that possible?
The file name doesn't actually matter. I don't just file name systems in general won't let you have the same file name in the same folder, but it's actually the name of the test itself that has to be unique. So like ours is column does not contain value. The file name doesn't matter, but the name of the test does. Yeah, good question. Anyone else?
Benny,
Yes.
I have a question.
What's up?
Can you put multiple tests in one file?
You can, yes, as long as you wrap them in the test keyword. It is not a recommended approach because you want your file name to match what the test is, and if you have multiple in there, your file name gets really long. But yes, you can. Did I answer that right?
You did a great job. Question?
For tests, that's as specific as it gets. So the YAML will feed those two things in. I can't think of any other instance where it's just provided for you like that. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. No. No, not at all. That's how you organize it. Our best practices are that it's one-to-one because it's a little bit easier to kind of scroll through them to find where the test is. But you don't have to be one-to-one file to test. You can put as many tests in a file as you want.
Have you ever been an engineer and you're building something out, or you're looking for a file, like a test, a macro, and you can't find it, so you just rebuild it yourself? Has anyone ever done that? Really? Yeah, I know you all have. Don't be shy. Okay. Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we want to keep the tests and the file names one-to-one, right? You don't want to get people in a bind where they can't find what they're looking for, they can't find the right test, they have to dig into some SQL file that's, way too long. Like, just make it one-to-one, you'll be good.
Yep.
Benny, I have another question.
Yeah, what's up?
Can you add subdirectories other than the generic subdirectory into the test folder?
You can, yes. Generic is the only one that's important. You can add as many subdirectories as you want, and you can actually add subdirectories in the generic subdirectory if you'd like.
Have to change anything in the DBT project YAML to do that?
You do not, no. So if you add subdirectories and you move files around, the directory that they're in does not matter. You good? All right. You disagree? All right. These are all impromptu, by the way. I did not plan all the questions from Lauren. All right. Yeah.
I just have a question about security types. So I know we can set tests to warn, but is there a way to get notified when a test warns, or is that still just going into the results?
Yeah, so at the moment, if a test warns, you still have to look at the logs of the job that failed. There is no notification if it is a warn. So you have to go into the job, and you'll see at the top, it'll say, these tests failed with warnings. Yep.
Will that be, I hit the logs, is that exported somewhere, and any of the exported logs that we look at, we can
I believe, yes. If it's reading like the artifacts themselves, so like run results is where that comes from, yes. It'll be available in there. Anyone else? Yeah, what's up? That is a fantastic question. I couldn't have paid you to give me a better segue. So, what we're going to do, I didn't pay him, by the way, is we are going to make this even more generic, right? We've created this, but we've still kind of hard-coded that equal sign. What if I wanted that to be greater than, less than? What if I wanted my value not to be a string? What if I wanted it to be a date? So there's still more that we can do to generify it, make it more generic. So looking at this, if I only wanted to pass in, say, 2 parameters, how could I make this more generic? I'm still going to keep my model. I'll give you that one. What am I going to change to make this more generic? We could loop if you wanted to, but what we're going to do is we're actually going to use expression. So we're going to change the where clause to just be expression. So you could loop through this test if you wanted to test it a couple times. But for this demo, we're just going to change the where clause, and we'll change it to expression. So what that would look like is this. You'll notice that we've changed the words and we've also changed the text. This is because in DBT, like I said at the beginning, you test for things that are opposite. So if we have a test called expression is true, we have to find where that expression is not true in our test, which is why in our where, we added a not, and we've surrounded our expression in parentheses. That means everything that we put into our parentheses saying this should be true, we will invert that for the logic. So let's go ahead and create this. If we go back into dbt Cloud, and we go back into this same thing, first thing I'm going to do is change the file name, and we're going to call this expression is true. And then we're going to change the name of the test itself. And we'll take off the last 2 inputs, and we'll just say expression. In the where clause, we'll add our not. We'll get rid of this still somewhat hard-coded thing. We'll open our parentheses, and then we will open our expression right there. So when this is fed in, we'll still get the model name, but now we're just feeding in an expression. So this can actually be any valid where clause that you could think of. You could string together tests. You could say this equals this, and this equals this, and this equals this. Anything that is a valid where clause, you would be able to feed in here. Now, one quick note on how to apply this. Since we've gotten rid of the column name, and that is automatically fed in, this will error if we keep it where it is. So we no longer have column name, but it's being provided. So what we have to do is actually not apply it at the column level, but we're going to apply it at the table level. So if I go up to my table, and I do tests, and this time it is expression is true. And what we have to do is provide the expression. And I'm going to open this up just a little bit so you can see. The quoting gets a little bit weird. Open this with double quotes, because we're going to use single quotes inside of it. But we're just going to test the exact same thing. We're going to say name equals, or sorry, does not equal, because now we've reversed it, test. So since we're saying expression is true, I expect there never to be the value test in here. This is a little bit easier to comprehend than our very long column does not contain value. So it's slightly shorter, and it also is said in the positive, so you're testing for the negative, which is what we're doing here. So if I hit save, we get our ready. And then if we test this again, which if you're in the new IDE, you can open this up and hit the rerun button. That way you don't have to type it again. Thank you for the gasp. I like it. What you'll see is that this is running, and now I'm getting a test called expression is true. And if I look at the logs, super anticlimactic, because it pretty much looks like the same thing that we had before, except it's more flexible. So here, we're saying where not, and then our expression is within these quotes, and it still passes. All right. I still have time for Q&A. So I'm going to tell you a story before I go to my next slide. There was research done around productivity of people building robots, like Lego robots. They would put together the robots. And researchers want to know, when people are doing this, are they more motivated by having it taken away and given a new box? Or are they more motivated by disassembling it in front of the person that just assembled it and giving it back to them? Anyone want to guess which one was more productive? No, not the second one. That's so demoralizing, right? You just put together this robot, and then a researcher comes over, takes it all apart, and then puts it right back in front of you and asks you to build it again. It's actually the first one. So you take it away from them, give them a box, and let them build another one, and they'll build and build and build. I mentioned that because I happen to have just done that to y'all, and I wanted to apologize for it in advance. So, you might be asking, if you looked at DBT utils, doesn't this already exist? Yes, it does. There's a test out there called expression is true that does this plus some. It actually does a lot more than what we were doing. But I wanted to show you that because now you know how to take a singular test, make it generic, you know about everything that's been fed in, and you can apply this to anything else. This is the most generic thing that you can do. Expression is true. It doesn't get more generic than this. So if you can do this, you can do pretty much anything that you want to with your tests. What I recommend doing is, if you're following along on the slides, is click on it and look at it. All of the source code for everything is out there. So if you ever have questions on how do I build this generic test, looking for it first will be a good thing because you'll know that you don't have to rebuild it. But you can also use any of these tests as an example. So you can see here that they've provided the same thing. They've made it more dynamic. They added column name. We didn't do that, which is fine. And they've also had some other kind of additional conditions that you can meet. So I highly encourage you to go and look at all of these, kind of browse through the code, and now you know what's happening within the code and how to write it yourself.
I'm going to ask you all one more time. Have you ever written a test and then later realized that it already existed? Everyone should be raising their hands. Everyone raise their
Everyone now,
hands.
'cause
You
I
just did it. You
Yeah.
just did it. They wrote a better test. Use it.
All right. So in summary, after this workshop, you should feel comfortable adding advanced configurations to the built-in tests. They can be applied to all tests, by the way. It's not just the built-in ones. So severity, you can put that on everything. You know how to add tests from packages. You know how to build singular tests. And you know how to create custom generic tests. If you have any questions, we still have 10 minutes. I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, feel free to have more time of your day back. And if there are any questions, feel free to post them in the Slack channel as well. I'll be monitoring it for an hour after the session to answer any questions you might have. Yeah, what's up? Yes. Yes. If you do store failures, you will get a table named after the test with the rows that actually failed the test. So you'll get all that information. Yeah. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, it's store failures is the command, and if you go onto DBT's website, so DBT store failures, there should be documentation around it that explains a little bit more about that. Yeah, good question. Anyone else? And feel free to come up too if you don't want to ask in front of everybody. I'll be up here for a while. Thank you all for attending.